Hello! Welcome to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours, where we spend time well by spending it together. I'm Claire Martin.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Howdy.
How we doing?
It's Wednesday.
You are not wrong.
5-day. I don't know,
It's
that's all I've
5 day.
got.
By the time 5 day is over, we will be more than halfway through.
I know. I saw that on my calendar today.
I think it's very appropriate that we have the halfway point of this series happen on Hump Day.
Oh.
Probably a 5 planned that.
It wasn't. Was that you, Kelly? No,
I didn't.
This would have been episode 7. We had to reorganize a bit. So, but thematically, this works quite nicely.
And here we are. I'm excited to learn about 5s. I think I was raised by one. It's a number, like, of the 9 numbers, this is like in tier 2 for me. Of like, might be possible, but probably isn't.
Right.
So
This one really jumped out at me. So I don't know how other 5s feel, but this was pretty evident for me. It was just it's like, yep. Oh, there are more people that are like this. Holy cow. I don't know. It was just one of those like moments, like literally I heard like 1 or 2 descriptions. And this also is one that I will say the subtypes and the instinctual variants actually lended a lot of affirmation for me because the 5 is typically sort of stereotyped as being super introverted. But there is a variant that will lend towards the extroversion, which is where things like Myers-Briggs and all of the other typologies, I feel like I'd never fit in one of those. So the Enneagram made more sense. Like there was more of an explanation for some outlying tendencies that I have. So I'm excited.
it's a celebration. It's a celebration of 5s.
And this would be a good moment to mention that Jeremy and I are being taught about the 5 today from a 5. So we are now firmly in Kelly's wheelhouse, which is good because Jeremy and I are feeling very adrift in Shakespeare's plays with this number. So it will be good to have someone who is an expert in the 5 helping orient us as we swim through the plays.
And I will say I'm listening closely to the 5 wing 4 because I think that one might swing me at least to some other potential characters.
I think it could too. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good,
including myself.
Maybe. Maybe. Okay. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Ready.
Okay. So the type 5 is called the observer classically. Also sometimes referred to as the investigator, also the questioner. So if you've taken any other typologies, I know there's one that calls us the questioners. It makes total sense. So we kick off the head triad. So now we've crossed the existential void from the heart space over to the head space, and we're moving on to like the left side of the diagram into the thinking center. So that center of intelligence means that everything that someone, a 5, a 6, or a 7 type is interpreting their environments through their thoughts. They also kind of retreat and hold on to their head space and very much are in their heads. I know other people can say that. They're up there. Jeremy, you posted something on Facebook the other day about thinking about feelings. So if I've caught myself even doing this, if someone asks me how I feel about something, I'll say, I think ... always. Right? So you can almost kind of hear that in people's language. Well, I think, or my sense is, right? Or kind of like words like that. And it actually, I do have to think about feelings. And that's how a lot of head types sort of resonate. Going along with the ways we've kind of pointed out different mechanics and pieces of each type, 5s are also body repressed, meaning they're very out of touch with their bodies. So their primary center is the head center. Their secondary or supporting kind of center of intelligence is the heart center. So I can find emotions if I think hard enough about them, but I am so body repressed and out of touch with my like intuition and gut because I don't trust it. one simple way that manifests is like forgetting to eat on time, right? If I'm too deep in work or study or doing something, or not going to bed on time because I'm so fascinated by whatever it is that I'm studying or learning. There's a need and a desire for the core motivation for the 5 to be competent, to acquire knowledge. And it's almost by way of like an actual resource. So 5s kind of operate in this scarcity mentality all the time. So they're preserving and protecting their resources. And we find security in information, right? So the basic fear for the 5 is being useless, helpless, and incapable. So I will say, you guys, kind of introduced me as an expert on 5s. I will never, ever, ever call myself an expert on anything because I always feel incompetent, right? So that to me is always a barrier. Go ahead.
I have a question about that thing, because the incapable and useless part of that sounds to me like how a 3 might feel at times, because their whole thing is about doing, so they have to be useful by doing things because they don't have the self-worth, right? So how do those connect?
I would say that it's more of a maybe even performative for the performer to be doing and accomplishing. And for the 5, it's less about accomplishing and more about knowing. So regardless of what the outcome is, if you can't get to the root of the mystery or tell me more about that. Like if you don't understand it, the understanding is more important than anything that comes out of it, right? So the fixation of the 5, so the thing that gets in the way of us understanding like our true essence is stinginess. It's often what we get kind of accused of being, and it's not a stinginess, an outward stinginess. It's more about us withholding our energy and our time and affection from others because, once again, we're trying to protect it. The passion for the 5 or the struggle is avarice, and that's a type of greed. It's kind of an old school word for greed, but once again, it's not about being greedy necessarily with material possessions, although that can be a part of it. It's more about being greedy with their energy. So 5s wake up every day and they perceive that they have a gas tank that maybe is full, but they know how much gas they've got in the tank every day.
I know
and
what
they know
you're
how much
right now.
Yes, Jeremy.
I understand 100%.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So they know that I know that this live stream is going to cost me X amount of gas. I know that the live stream I just did an hour ago cost me X amount of gas. I know that if I were to go out to coffee with a friend, if that were a thing that I were doing right now, which it is not, that it would cost me X amount of gas. So I have to budget that into my time. Otherwise, I will be completely drained and like literally zapped for the day. I go into 5s go into hibernation mode, like however they choose to refill their tank. Like if I go on a conference for work, I will sleep for 2 days. And my family, everyone knows that about me now. And I'm not fully introverted though. So that's the thing, right? It can kind of express itself in different ways. I can turn on when I need to, but I have a very measured amount of energy. I say I have it. I think that I have a very measured, that's part of the fallacy. That's part of the ego and coping mechanism is I've convinced myself over time that I only have so much, so I have to protect it, right? So a lot of times when 5s are accused of being kind of like walled off, again, I mentioned boundaries a couple of times, especially on the 2 episode. Boundaries are a very real thing for me. There's a subtype of 5 that is actually called the castle because nobody's getting in. I really prefer getting a text before a phone call because then it gives me time to prep and allocate the energy for the conversation that I know the person deserves, but I can't do it on the fly. Like I need to prepare for it. I want to kind of make sure that I've got enough padding around it to not over deplete what I perceive to be my finite resources. Oh my God, I can keep going. This will be the longest episode if you guys just let me talk.
No. All of these things make 100% sense to me.
Yeah, they do make sense.
I will move around my schedule because it feels like overwhelming. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Because you know your limits. Are the limits real perceived? Who knows, right? But still, they matter to you, and you want to be able to give your best to each thing. Fives are also really, I would say, guilty. I don't think it's a bad thing, but we can catch on to really obscure things that seem interesting or that we don't fully understand, and like dive all the way in. And kind of fall down a research rabbit hole just because it's something we don't know. And we derive meaning once we've kind of discovered the truth of a thing. And that often requires like really deep study or lots of work around it. And it could have absolutely no bearing to our lives, our professions. It could just be something that we need to know.
Like the idiosyncrasies of Shakespearean bibliography.
Or... and Shakespeare and the Enneagram, right? I mean, it's like, but yeah. So things that are interesting that a lot of other people wouldn't, there's no gain there, right? Other than just accruing knowledge or information to have up here, because the more we have up here, the safer we feel. Okay. So let's see.
We do wings.
We can talk about wings. Okay. So, on either side of the 5 is the 4 and the 6. So the 4, I'm less familiar with. I do have a bit of a 4 wing. It's very small, but I can pull into. It's weird because you wouldn't think of a 5 as being overly artistic or creative. Like it seems like a dissonance there, but it's actually not. So I do a ton of graphic design. I like dabble in things. I actually really love music, even though I would never sing professionally. I did drama when I was a kid. You know, like random things like that. But the 5 wing 4 is called the Iconoclast. So they bring a uniqueness, and they bring in like a vision to the art, right? So, I mean, Jeremy, I'm going to pull up some other notes before we dig too deep into this. But
I'm nothing if not iconoclastic, and that word scares me quite a lot.
Does it? Okay. So there, Stephen King was one that they meant, or one of the books mentioned, that is a really classic 5 with a 4 wing. The 5 with a 6 wing, however, pulls into the 6's kind of cooperative nature, and they're called a problem solver. So they're able to kind of forecast a little bit more. Like 5s get really stuck kind of in the past, and 6s are more future oriented and kind of thinking worst case scenarios, sort of thinking, and also doing everything to hold the group together. So that is for sure my stronger wing. It's called the problem solver. One of our like mottos or slogan for my day job is that, you know, what we define our brand as is problem solving. And I just think that's funny because it keeps pumping. And everything that we do for military families when they're relocating, everything that I've kind of unintentionally, but now seeing that I set it up on purpose, was research driven. So it's all about content, and it's all about making smart decisions based on as much information as possible. So that's what you get when you put a 5 in charge of a startup. It becomes a glossary, an archive. There are stress and security I'll touch on briefly, and then we can dive in because I'm sure you guys have tons of questions. We're in the withdrawing stance. So the way that we get our needs met is to actually pull away. Because our need, remember, is conserving that energy, making sure that we feel prepared. So instead of moving towards people or working with people, we move away from people. And then our conflict style is the way we deal with conflict is competency. So if I'm in conflict with someone and maybe I don't understand their position or my position, I will dig into research and Google and Facebook search things until I feel a little bit like I have a better handle on what an actual neutral stance might look like. So we are capable of neutrality in a way that other types are not. I think objectivity is possible to such an extent. So sort of like a 9, but a 9 sort of merges in a different way. And a 5 can sort of detach from the situation and sort of hover above it and be a non-judgmental sort of participant in that way. So they're often looked to in times of crisis to bring sort of a neutral, like, okay, well, let's consider this, right? An opposite point of view. We're also, though, accused of being aloof or insensitive because we're pretty detached from the emotionality of a moment. And it's hard for 5s to engage in deep relationships. We're very quality over quantity type people. You're going to have 5s with a very, very small social circle because trust is huge, and that faith in people isn't given super easily, because again, that could drain your resources, or people seem intrusive. People seem demanding, because we don't demand from other people. We are very self-reliant, scared to ask for help. Not scared. We don't ask for help because we wouldn't want anybody else asking us for help. So we don't ask for help. Like, why would you ask me to do that? Why would I ask somebody to take me to the airport when I don't want to go get them from the airport? Like, I just want to ask, right? Because that seems like an intrusion. And again, that's pulling away from people.
I have a question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Help me understand this is a 5-wing-4 question, but like the aloofness and the detachment and the sort of like it's not caring part of the 5 matched up with the emotion and the feeling life of a 4.
So 5s are deeply sensitive, but they have disconnected from it as a preservation sort of mechanism, right? Like, feelings are scary because they can't be explained, right? They can't be understood. They have to be felt. So the 5 with a 4 wing is going to perceive and observe those emotions and feelings, and maybe be able to be a little more in touch with them, but have a really hard time actually connecting authentically with them. And vice versa, the 4 is going to feel them and have the 5 wing kind of bring them into maybe a more measured sort of expression of the emotion. I'm not sure if that's a great example, but I think that could be a piece of it.
And Kellie, you mentioned yesterday that we are also contending with a void between 4 and 5, a kind of existential gulf there. So 4-wing 5s and 5-wing 4s, like, there is going to be a little bit of additional contradiction, right? Just because there's so much space between these two Enneagram numbers.
Yep, I agree with that. I think that's great. Yeah, and it's kind of a chasm to reach across. When done well, that can look really, honestly, probably look really evolved, because now you've got a head type who can reach into the body triad for certain things, and then can also then reach into the heart space. So back to that, the 5 is also connected via the 2 lines with 8 and 7. So the growth point for a 5 that is functioning well and sort of integrating can move to 8 and take on leadership roles, whereas otherwise they might be kind of not stagnant, but not necessarily seeking out too much responsibility. They're again happy to be a supporting role, but with the 8 strength and courage, they can take on leadership roles. They can also feel more empowered and be a bit more grounded, because again, we're always up here. We're not really like walking the earth in this moment, right? We're just kind of like thinking about it. So the 8 energy really helps kind of yank us back down and be a bit more like present instead of always like off in the clouds. Moving to stress, we've got a high side and a low side of a stress point. So when we feel like our needs aren't being met with our own sort of bucket of coping mechanisms that are available to us as a 5, we can either move intentionally to 7 or move kind of habitually to 7. So on the high side, the 7 is the enthusiast, which we'll talk more about in a couple of days. But the 7 brings like joy and levity and fun to the life of a 5, which could otherwise look kind of bookish and boring and closed off from people. So it can help you kind of engage with the world around you, be more social, invest in more relationships, and just say yes to more things. So instead of thinking out and researching the best resort to go to for vacation when we finally can vacation, a 7 would be like, let's go to the mountains, right? Like, and using that energy, they can move a bit more freely. The low side of 7 is a scary move, truthfully. And I'm telling you this from personal experience. When not done well, the gluttony, which is the passion for the 7, and the excess can lead to escapism, can be pretty frenetic. It can also lead to like abandonment, like abandoning things that are important and that you love. That used to look like for me in like college days, let's say, just partying like way too hard, right?
Risk-oriented behavior is what you're saying.
I am saying that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a weird jump, right? The 5 to the 7 looks very different. And it's scary for people that witness it even, because it's just like, what in the world got into that person, right? Because usually being very reserved and objective and thoughtful of everything, and then just say, F it, let's do this, or let's, eat too much, drink too much, what could be anything. Or now as an adult, that's looking like working too much or taking on too many projects or saying yes, being super impulsive about things when I know that I can't manage it and it's going to lead me to burnout eventually, but I don't have the safety mechanisms in place when I've gone to 7 in a bad way to be able to measure that out and be more realistic with what I'm doing.
Jeremy, this is going to be
a
really...
things I understand. I can't tell if I understand them because I lived in the household. Do you know what I mean?
I also want to say that because I am a 5, I am able to speak on this in such a way that it may even convince you that you are a 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But actually, it makes me think more of a TV show character that I've been watching a lot lately, which is Kendall Roy on Succession.
Yes.
Is a 5. I mean, he's just that's what he is. It's all about competence. But then when he goes into stress, those risk-oriented behaviors are nuts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unbelievably
That's a great one. So some others that I have, I mentioned serial killers last time. So I've got Dexter. I have always adored Dexter. Like, I'm like, that's my, Other than I get him. Like, his inner monologue is a thing. Like, we have this dialogue, and it's like Observation City. Like, we're just like, oh, I wonder what that person's doing. Oh, I should look up that. There's always like this, and then he's like, oh, I'm supposed to cry right now, or I'm supposed to, what is the emotion that I'm supposed to do to follow his code.
Sure.
Anyway, Dexter's great. Marty Byrde from Ozark, I'm gonna say I like him as a 5. Sherlock Holmes is a classic one. Dr. House on House.
Yes.
Bill Gates, Hitchcock, and my favorite, Kurt Cobain.
While we're talking about pop culture, so 5 strike me as a Ravenclaw number.
I like that.
And as we were talking about 5-wing 4 versus 4-wing 5, it's like the difference between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. Gryffindor is like heart-oriented first, and it's not that they're not smart at times, but like that's not the way they go. And Ravenclaw is all like brain first, and then other things come after. For what that's worth, that's just what 5 just strike me as a Ravenclaw. That's it.
And just because someone is bookish too, right? Like, so I saw in a thread somewhere that Hermione might be a 5, and I don't like that because I think she's more 1-ish to me.
Yeah.
Because the acquisition of knowledge and information is more about doing the right thing because that's what's expected, and versus someone who's like purely curious. So.
Okay,
yeah, I think
this
that
is helpful.
I would agree with that, Jeremy, that like Ravenclaw is there is some 5 quintessence there, but I also would argue that like any number on the Enneagram, you could be any Hogwarts house, and I think there's probably like, that doesn't mean that there aren't like trends, but I don't think your number is directly correlated to like 1 or 2 houses. I think you could pair up any as a person.
I think I agree with you that in broad terms, I do think that you're going to find like more of X whatever. You're going to find more something in these houses versus these houses.
Like trends.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's it.
Trends.
Yeah, I agree with you otherwise. Yeah.
I've got healthy and unhealthy still. Really quickly, healthy 5s are rational, objective, perceptive, self-sufficient, insightful. They have expertise, and they can hold multiple perspectives at the same time, multiple opinions, and kind of like in almost like a non-dualistic way. Just instead of being black and white like a couple of other types that we've talked about and we'll talk about, they can kind of occupy that gray space really comfortably. In a unhealthy, just like not disintegrate, but very like falling through the levels of health for a 5 look like nihilism. Once you know all that you know, like, oh my God, we're screwed, right? Eccentric is eccentricity. They can be isolated, escapist, cynical, and seem apathetic or are apathetic. Either way. So that should be plenty for y'all to work with.
Are you enjoying the episode so far? Then you should consider joining the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Patreon community. As we gear up for another exciting season of shows, concerts, and events, we are issuing a challenge to boost our monthly Patreon sustainer giving. For a pledge of as little as $5 a month, you can ensure that Sweet Tea Shakespeare can continue making delightful content all year round. You can also buy a season ticket that will grant you access to all of our exclusive Patreon content, along with reserved seats to every one of our performances. For more information on season tickets, check out our website at sweetteashakespeare.com. To join our Patreon community, you can find us at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. Thanks so much.
Who do you have?
Well, this is hard, and I agree with what we were saying earlier, which is that there aren't that many compared to some other things.
No.
But now that we say that Kendall Roy is one, I mean, I think there is that kind of journey in some of these Shakespeare plays, but maybe not that kind of motivation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we see some of that happen in a play. Like that's a sort of tragic, sarcastic, sardonic kind of figure that I feel like we see a lot, but really we don't see a lot of those characters being motivated that way. As an example,
we don't.
Like Hal and Kendall have a lot in common, but Hal is not motivated by those things.
No, he's not.
So, one I feel fairly confident in is a relatively obscure character from As You Like It, named Amiens.
I had him too.
Yeah, who's just like this competent little
Yeah.
musician who just wants to be seen as good, and he's healthy, I think, and there's nothing going on psychopathic in any way.
No.
I have some question marks. I'll just go through two. I think feel free to yell at me for this, but I think Celia might have some five-ishness in that play.
I don't see that. I don't see that.
I think Osric.
I had
Hamlet.
Osric.
I wonder about Quickly. It's a very different kind of energy, but it is about sort of like seeing things just so. And anyway, I have a question mark of Cranmer in Henry VIII.
I had him.
I have Sir Nathaniel in Love's Labour's Lost, maybe.
As do I.
In Macker's, maybe. I think Ross is probably very much this way. Is it very much about competence and making sure he does the job okay and all of that. I wonder about Banquo, who is concerned with his usefulness.
Yeah. So.
But Banquo, you go first.
No, I had Ross in an earlier type, and I moved him to 5. So I would agree with you about Ross. I think he is the ultimate 5 civil servant, right? He takes his. I think I took his professionalism more seriously than his competency, but I think that you're right in that he probably is a 5. Banquo, I mean Banquo's always been a bit of an enigma to me. But I tend to think of Banquo more as a 9. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know that I have strong feelings about it, but I wasn't reading Banquo as a 5.
Yeah, I don't know which one. Like, yeah, I could see a 9 too, but I think the 5-ishness might, like, for me, it was coming up in, he does express like a little bit of like, resentment and edge and jealousy and those kinds of things. And I wondered if that, Kelly can help us, maybe more 5 or 9. You know what I mean? But I think the fundamental problem here is that Banquo is not really a 3-dimensional character. He's more of an emblem. And so we don't ever get a full picture. There was one speech at the top of a scene where he's sort of talking through some of his thinking a little bit. And he is doing some investigating there on a pretty literal level. But it's not like that just happens to be the circumstance. It's not like a character trait. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do.
Tell us
really
about the
struggled
difference between 5 and 9, Kellie. If you would.
They're kindred spirits. I'll tell you that. I adore nines. Like I gravitate to nines. Love their energy. So the differentiators between 5 and 9 are going to be approachability, which I'm cracking up. I'm reading this again. This is Ginger Lapid Bogda's book. Approachability. So do you set up like it's harder to get to me than it is to get to a 9. Like a 9 would be much more welcoming
I think
than a 5.
He's more approachable.
Schmoozing and small talk. So 9s are better at this than 5s are.
He does that with Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
And then no nonsense or rudeness. Oh, that's funny. That's how I didn't know this. So 5s are very direct, but I guess 9s have a tendency to seem rude if given like framed in the same way.
Okay.
I think Banquo's a 9.
Yeah. When we learn more about him in a few days, we'll probably make that list.
Who else do you have?
So I have some other. I have the provost in Measure for Measure, who's
Me
this
too.
slick, competent professional.
Yes.
But is a great character too. And the reason I hate that play in part is because that is a major character with significant lines who gets like buried under the title provost, and I don't know. I just like it. I just like that part. Hi, Anna Burby, who played that part for me in the first show I directed out of grad school many, many years ago.
And Marissa Marcus, who played the provost as a bartender when we set our sight specifically in a bar.
Fantastic. I have Narissa in Merchant of Venice.
Yes, so do I. But I had question marks next to Narissa. I also had the Prince of Morocco.
I don't. Oh, sure. I think the Prince of Morocco is the key to that play, but that is for another day. I think everything you can understand about that play, you can understand from watching that scene.
Yep.
And I don't think Narissa really has a dark side that's terribly detectable, at least compared to everyone else in that play.
I know.
All have dark sides.
It's a sliding scale in that play.
Yeah. I have question mark, but I chuckled when I wrote it down, and that is Peter Quince. Who is, if he is a 5, he's in stress the whole damn play.
Yes.
And is like this doing the 7 stressy thing. Do you know what I mean?
See, I don't think so, because I don't think because I agree that he is in stress the whole play, and he does not take risks. He tries so hard in stress to like maintain the rules, maintain the structure, like keep it together, guys. Don't go off the rails on me. He is in high stress.
You think he's a 1?
He takes no risk. No, I think he's an 8.
Interesting.
I think he's a.
I have played Peter Quince once before. Did you know?
I think he's a sweetheart. I think he's an 8 with a heart of gold, but I think he's an 8.
Yeah, I think I don't know that I disagree with you. I'm trying to remember when I played it. So it was my first show in North Carolina as an actor. I played Peter Quince for David Henderson up in Raleigh, and I do think there's like I think when we get to 8, we can talk about this too. But like everything Bottom does offends Peter Quince, and that definitely resonates with the 8 thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So anyway, we'll come back to him maybe. I have too many question marks behind some of these, but a couple of the interesting ones have something in common, and that is even though I'm not sure they're actually characters in a traditional sense, but I think maybe Chorus and Henry V and Gower and Pericles have a 5 thing going on there.
Okay,
how they talk about how they want their play to be received and delivered and all of that, and they are kind of like a little defensive about that. Go ahead.
Interesting. I had Gower. I did have Gower from Pericles. The Chorus from Henry V, I think, is a super manipulative too.
Mm-hmm.
Because the story that the Chorus gives is never what we see.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the polished Henry as hero version, which is not the play or history.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Chorus has much darker motivations, and I don't think, because I feel like the 5 is invested in finding out the truth, right? In getting the authentic knowledge, even if you have to go down a rabbit hole of research to get it. Whereas the Chorus in Henry V has ostensibly all that information and is in a play where you can see that information. You can see how treacherous and ruthless Henry V is. And yet the chorus is like, he's a hero, you guys. Look at the amazing king we have. And so it just feels much more, he feels like a marketer. He feels like someone from marketing in Henry V. And he's
Kellie,
marketing.
what is it you do for a living?
I'm in marketing. I'm in communications technically, and I'm really good at crafting messages that convey exactly what I think and think you want to hear from me. So,
but I don't think it's what the chorus really thinks. I think it's what the chorus has to tell us. I think Gower is a 5. I think the chorus is more manipulative than that.
So, I've got a couple more, and then I want to come back to a question I have. So I think Thaliard, which is this really minor character in Pericles who's an assassin and the psychopath, I actually have played him before as this sort of cold, calculated,
interesting,
emotionally detached, like I'm here to...
Yeah.
And he's only in 2 scenes, but I had a blast playing that part. And
I can see that.
It sounds to me... I'll come back to a couple of these.
Okay.
I wonder about Hastings and Richard III.
Yeah, I had him too.
Gonzalo in The Tempest is the only one I'm really, really convinced is a 5, like on my whole list.
Yeah,
he's
same.
just running around talking about information all the time, and it has no association with anything else anyone cares about. But it is about that.
Did you know?
I have question marks besides some big characters, and I could use 3 big characters, and I could use, first of all, one of the 3 I'm convinced is not this, but I want to see why I think that. So I have Beatrice, Viola, and Malvolio as people with questions beside them, and I just want to talk about them. I'm not, like, I wrote them down thinking, oh, maybe there are some things. This is before Kellie taught us lots more information. But I'd be interested to chat about any or all of them. We can go after your list, though.
Beatrice and Viola, I'm willing to discuss with you. I don't agree, but I'm willing to, like, talk it out and see where you were coming from. I feel like Malvolio is, like, such a 1. I just can't...
Oh, I get the puritanical part of that,
He fit everything we talked about with 1s. In terms of the, like, potentially unhealthy 1, but he was, like, right there.
We're often mistyped as 1s and 3s because of the competency.
That's what I was landing on. He's very, very concerned about that. And he has access to this whole emotional thing that he, like, erupts into.
Yeah.
And iconoclasm and yellow stockings cross-gartered are an overlapping Venn diagram.
Well,
and that's why I landed on him. But he was the one that I had the most doubt about of those 3 names.
Erupting is not, I'm just going off words, not your character, because I'm not versed, but like eruption to me would be way more anger, gut triad than a headspace reaction. I don't yell, like, ever. My kids think it's kind of weird.
Okay, so like when he erupts, it's in health. At first, he erupts into love. It's very strong, and he's like, he goes and gets dressed in a new costume and, like, tries to woo Olivia. That's not 8 stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying is that 5 stuff. It's like,
I'm just thinking like 8 is the place you go when you're in health, right?
No.
Okay. No. Okay.
No.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe, but
where does a 1 go when they're in health? 4?
They 4?
Yeah, I think
that makes sense too. He becomes romantic. Sure.
Yeah. I think he's...
No. Their heart point is the 7, their stress point is the 4.
Yeah, but I mean,
either way.
Yellow stockings cross-gartered and wooing loudly and ridiculously, that seems pretty 7 to me.
Sure.
I think he's a 1.
Okay. Now we can talk about the other 2, but we can talk about it after your list. I'm fine with that.
You guys want subtypes yet, or would that help?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So self-preservation is the first subtype of the 5. Those are called castles. So those are the folks that are most concerned with their energy, both physically.
Not you. That's Beatrice.
Oh.
So
Maybe.
these are the most quintessential fives. Like these are the fiviest fives, because they literally wall themselves off. They could even get into like hoarding tendencies, right? Their space is sacred, and they are just boundaried to the max. The social subtype is what I am. It's called the totem. So they're more interested in people. They're more extroverted and outgoing, and they actually collect interesting people as means of collecting the information and the interesting things. So instead of it being like tabs on a browser, they might be friend groups that they are just like deeply entranced by and really enamored by. So they're viewing other experts as resources for them.
I don't see that with Beatrice.
Collecting people is an interesting concept.
Yes, it is. I just don't think it's her.
No, I that's definitely not her. I don't think. No, but like that is what artistic directors of theater companies do.
You literally collect people.
As an example.
I mean, kind of. That's true.
So the sexual five or 1-to-1 five is called confidence, and they search for strong, deep connections with one other person whom they trust, and they can share their confidences. That's another thing. We're super private people, and it helps preserve and protect themselves, that person, and then the other special relationship. So that's actually the counter type. So the one that looks the least like a five, or goes against the avarice passion, meaning they're more giving instead of like keeping. So they're big on intimacy also.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead. You
I
go.
don't think that's, well, I just, Beatrice is closed off to Benedict. She is an open book to the rest of the world. She's emotional.
Pedro.
She literally laughs him off, and then she has to be like, oh no, like my mom like cried when I was born, but it's okay because I was, I'm happy.
I read that a little bit as a shell, like she's keeping lots of people away because of how much she's been sort of hurt. And not the women, but the dudes, yes.
I mean, like, I guess I just read that moment differently. Because I honestly read that moment with Don Pedro as like she rejects him laughing, just assuming he was kidding, and then when she realizes he's not, she was like, oh no, but you don't want to be in love with me. I suck. I'm a mess. But like that's who I am. Like I feel like she's very candid about herself and her flaws.
I've actually done that.
And she, have you really?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
but
I think there's every reason to think she's an 8, right? But I'm just curious because there's like this thing.
Because I read her wall with Benedict as deriving from the fact that they have a past, which is kind of what we talked about with I think it's kind of what we talked about with Hermie and Lysander, where you were like, they're achievers because they're going after a goal, and I was like, but every character has a goal, right? Like if you have an experience with one person where they hurt you, you're probably going to develop a wall for that one person, but that doesn't mean that that's who you are.
This leads me to ask the question of what is the childhood lack from Kellie?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, buckle up. So the lost message for the 5, and I've read a lot of different things, and it's funny because the first few things, most of the like literature out there usually talks about the lost message or the childhood wound for a 5 being either neglected or smothered as a child, like too much affection. This is too much. I can't, or they were neglected and left to kind of care on their own. The most recent thing that I read that really finally kind of cracked that open for me as a 5 is it was, first of all, we're humans. So all of these childhood messages don't necessarily mean trauma or something horrible happening. It's just the fact that we're human and we can't understand love. We can't give love. We can't really receive love perfectly in the way that it's meant to go. And given all of these ego structures, it just confuses the message. And then our character type kind of reinforces that lost message throughout our lives. So for the 5, I think let's say, my parents had me and they were like, wow, this kid is super easy. She knows how to do things really well. There isn't an ability there. Like I could figure things out. I was kind of self-sufficient. And they're like, okay, great. She's good. I don't have to like do as many things for her as they did for, say, my younger sibling. But here I am as a child observing a difference in the affection, or not that it was real, right? But I'm observing or perceiving a different type of relationship that I was not getting. And so then what the 5 does is say, well, I know I'm not the problem, so it must be them. So it's almost like there's a bit of a focus on like anticipating rejection. I have really low expectations for people. I don't get hurt a lot. When I do, it knocks me off my rocker, because then I'm almost upset with myself because I've let them get close enough to me to hurt me in the first place. Right. But I have boundaries. I have low expectations. Like, it takes a while to scale the wall, so to speak, but I've erected those. Not saying this is a good thing. This is clearly, podcast is therapy, right? But the message there is that no one else loved me in the way that I thought I deserved to be loved. So I'll just do this on my own. I'll just do my own thing, and I'll be self-sufficient and self-reliant and come up with as much information as I need to feel safe. So,
okay.
If you enjoy the work of Sweet Tea Shakespeare, you can find us all over the socials. We're on Facebook. We have a special secret Facebook community group that we'd love for you to join. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, we're on it. So join us, click in, give us a like, leave us a review, and we look forward to connecting with you in all of those places. If you'd like to contact us, please email ours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS@sweetteashakespeare.com.
So
that sounds like a lot of Beatrice stuff, but
yeah,
not
there's a lot
particularly
of
because of her
Beatrice in there.
childhood. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know anything about her
Click as
childhood,
much for
really.
me as, yeah. And to me, she seems to have neither too much affection from Leonardo or neglect. She seems to just be kind of in a, like, she just hangs with that family. She loves Hero.
She seems pretty healthy, except for the Benedict past business.
Yeah. And that's where I don't know if what Kellie's describing resonates, because she has that relationship with one other person, right? Or if that really is a pattern in her life, if that really is the way that she moves through the world. I don't know. When we get to 8, we should look at her again, and we should take another pass. So I can talk about the characters that I have, since we're running out of time.
We have all the time in the world.
From All's Well That Ends Well, I have the Countess of Roussillon with a major 4 wing. She's got the heart capacity, like she can tap into that, but I think she's a 5. I also had Amiens from As You Like It. And I have Antipholus of Syracuse from Comedy of Errors. Like, he's on the hunt for his brother, and he's very he is determined to seek the truth and find his family. And I think that for him, it's not so much that he was neglected as a child or smothered as a child. It's that he feels like he doesn't have the whole family. He feels like he doesn't have the whole of the love. And he's going out to find information that will get him to the people that can fill out his sphere. So Antipholus of Syracuse. From Cymbeline, I have Belarius and possibly Guiderius as well, who possibly learned it from Belarius. But I think Belarius is definitely a 5. And to clarify, Belarius is the king's, what was he? He was an advisor or something, and he was accused of treason by King Cymbeline, and he was banished, and then as payback, he took the king's 2 sons with him and raised them as his own sons. And I don't know, it's a weird play. I also have Sir Nathaniel from Love's Labours. I also had the Provost from Measure for Measure. I also am rethinking what I said about the Duke Vincentio. He might be a 5.
Well,
I think he's definitely.
I almost wrote the Duke down
psychopath.
too. And the reason I did is because it seems like that whole the whole play is about him investigating, right?
Yeah.
Seeing, doing the, I don't know.
But also he's sociopathic. The Duke in Measure for Measure. So I have no troubles he's so detached that it gets frightening, you know? So I can easily see the Duke being a 5. Which is why I think one of the reasons that scene between the Duke and the Provost, when he tells the Provost just kill somebody else and say it was Claudio, that might be one of the reasons that scene is so electric. If they're both 5s and they're both kind of legalistically arguing for their sides. That's why that scene is so satisfying. I had Nerissa from Merchant of Venice. I do think the Prince of Morocco is a 5, and I think that in a future podcast we should just like talk about the Prince of Morocco, because that is to me the only scene that like I care about in that play.
I think it's the only scene with a human being in the entire play, like an actual human being with a soul. Yep.
Thank you. But also the other scene I like from that play is the disastrous Lorenzo and Jessica in the moonlight at the end. That scene gives me like chills. From Merry Wives of Windsor, I have Ford, right? Mm-hmm. He's investigating his wife's alleged infidelity, and he's just horribly emotionally detached, and I just think he's a 5. From Midsummer Night's Dream, I have Philostrate, I think is a classic 5. I think that's why he's so disdainful of the mechanicals, because none of them are 5s. For Much Ado, I have the Friar, whose brilliant idea it is to have hero fake die. From Pericles, I have Lysicamus. From Taming of the Shrew, possibly Baptista is a 5. He seems really emotionally out of touch, and so that to me, I was like, maybe he's a 5. From Tempest, I had Gonzalo. From Troilus and Cressida, I think Ulysses is like the ultimate 5. I mean, it's Odysseus, who I think was definitely a 5. From Twelfth Night, like possibly Valentine and Curio, depending on how they're played. They could be 5s to Orsino's like lovesick whelp 4. Two Gentlemen of Verona, the Duke of Milan, boring. From The Winter's Tale, I think the 2 people that come from the Oracle at Delphi, Cleomenes and Dion, I think they're probably 5s. They're very like aloof and analytical. From the Henriade, I have the Duke of York in Richard II. Group and Glenda Henry IV's, and Fluellen from Henry V. Fluellen to me is a 5-wing 4 because he's got that heart, that big open heart. But at the same time, like ultimately, like it's about learning, it's about like knowledge and like classical, like the I don't know, the great tomes of like classical warfare, and I don't know, he just strikes me as like the ultimate nerd. From the Wars of the Roses plays, I also had Hastings from Richard III. I think Warwick from the earlier Henry VI's, and possibly the Bishop of Winchester. From King John, Cardinal Pandulph, maybe. I also had Cranmer from Henry VIII. So this is a big question mark one that I want to come back to. But from A and C and Julius Caesar, I think Octavian might actually be a 5. I think he's either a 5 or a 1, and I have the same back and forth in my head with that we were sort of talking about with Malvolio. So I'd like to circle back to Octavian. From Coriolanus, the 2 tribunes that turned the plebs against Coriolanus, Brutus and Voludus, I think they're 5s, or at least one of them. From Hamlet, I think Fortinbras, which I think is why the ending of that play is like, you know, I think that's why the ending of the play is what it is. The only one that was going to make it through that tornado was a 5. King Lear, Albany, I think is a 5. And I think he's a very introverted 5. So I think that going up against Goneril is like just, you know, terrifying for him. From Mackers, I had Ross, and I have no idea who else. From Othello, Lodovico. From Romeo and Juliet, I think Friar Lawrence is possibly a 5. I had a lot of churchmen. I had like Archbishop's Group and Cranmer and Cardinal Pandulph and the Friar from Much Ado, and I think possibly the Friar from R&J. From Timon, no one, and from Titus Andronicus, no one. So that's my list. But I struggled. These were hard to find.
5 and 1. Some of you come back to that twice, so I'm going to bring up the differentiators there. So between a 5 and a type 1 and a type 5, the one clarifying question would be about time, energy, and boundaries. So a 1 would say yes to a thing and do a thing or a project or, you know, an investigation, whatever, no matter how tired or exhausted or how even resentful they may be about accepting the task or the request. And a 5 would not, because that's too much. Like, nope, cross my boundary.
Okay.
Another thing is self-control versus self-containment. So ones can exert the self-control, to make sure to keep their kind of energy, whatever, preserved. But a 5 is going to contain themselves and be very, almost like their animation is low, their energy expenditure is very low. Like they almost go on like a sleep mode when it comes to something that's being asked of them that might be too much, right? Or they're up against a thing that is too much.
Sure.
And then doing or thinking. So a 1's going to do and a 5's going to think. So just fun example. My husband's an 8 and I'm a 5. He's in the doing triad. I'm in the thinking triad. When the hurricanes were coming at us a couple of years ago, first of all, he wanted to stay. I wanted to leave. So that's asserting withdrawing, right? Like I wanted to evacuate. He wants to stay. The next conversation we had was we bought a generator and he was literally kicking it to make it start. And I was reading the instruction manual cover to cover and on YouTube, like looking at videos. Like bottom line, like that's instinctual, right? Like, no, we need to read all the instructions. We need to read the whole book, right? And he's like, no, it'll work, just for sheer force of will. And I think a 1 can kind of fall into that realm as well, being up there in the body triad.
Okay. Then I think that Friar Lawrence is a 1. I think he's like Malvolio. I think they're both 1s. Because Friar Lawrence, even when Balthazar comes like banging on his door super late at night and he's like, my master is in the graveyard, and Friar Lawrence is like, oh shit, let's go. And then he runs out of the house and they go to it's just, doing is a, even if Friar Lawrence is exhausted, which he probably is by that point, he still is a doer. He's a doer. Juliet comes and he's not like, okay, think about this before you kill yourself. He's like, no, here's another thing you can do. Here's another thing you can do instead of killing yourself. So I think I think Friar Lawrence is a 1. What about Octavian though, Jeremy?
Yeah, I considered putting him on the list today, and then remembered that we had him down for something else. I think a 1 earlier.
I think it was a 1 too.
And But when I think about it, it is. I mean, certainly. This might be an actor choice.
Yeah.
Because I do think certainly in Antony and Cleopatra, he is all about enforcing rules. That's what we see him do the whole time. It's the structure of Rome versus the absence of that in Egypt and the resentment that builds because of that.
Sure.
But certainly he's emotionally withdrawn, and
yes,
maybe with the exception of Octavia's got a 1-on-1 there, so that would be the sexual subtype. But I could see it being one of those two based on some actor choices.
Maybe he's a 5-wing 6, because he's definitely a problem solver. Octavian in A and C is like, there's a problem, I'm gonna fix that. Mm-hmm. He definitely has that ethos.
And I could see that being like the best time I've ever seen an Octavian on stage was at the RSC, and I can't remember the actor's name. I'm sorry, but he fidgeted the whole time, like he could not keep his hands still because he was like driven by that 6 anxiety. So that makes me, that image of that actor and their portrayal makes me think something like a 5-wing 6 or something. I think.
Yeah.
It was the only time I've seen that a production of that play where I thought that the third most important character was Octavian and not Enobarbus. And I liked it.
That's not good.
No, I liked it. I thought it was like, okay. No, I'm like, there's someone driving the action of this play. That's interesting.
I was gonna say, that's not good because it means you've seen a lot of bad productions. Because I feel like if you don't come away thinking Octavian is the number 3 of that play, then the play, what you have just seen, must have been a meandering mess. Because nothing in the plot would happen if it weren't for Octavian. That's why I see him as the protagonist. Like I don't like he incites all of the things that happen. the two, I feel like the choices that A and C make to die, that only affects themselves. It doesn't affect the plot per se. Octavian is the only one doing anything. I'm sorry, I really struggle with that play, but
we'll pencil a time where we can fight about it. It'll be great.
I hate that play.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's
Not
fine.
really.
You like it?
I do like it.
That's good.
I don't love it. I just like it.
Yeah.
I think there are moments in that play where he's operating in top form. It is not sustained, but there are a couple moments in that play where I don't think you could do better than that. I don't think he Shakespeare has done better than that. But I don't think it's like a masterpiece, like contained, like structurally perfect, etc., in addition to all the other things, like Henry IV Part 1 or a Midsummer or something like that. Do you know?
Yeah.
Or a 12th
Henry IV
Night.
Part 1. Henry IV Part 1 is pretty damn perfect. Yeah, I don't know. I just get fed up with the characters in that play. And but I do think that the key to that play is cutting the script to those big choices that Octavian makes, so that there is like acceleration, and that you can actually like you can track point A to B to C to D, you know, and so on. Because otherwise,
I think the secret to that play is drums. Lots of drums all over the place. Drums, just drums, just banging away, waking you up.
Sure.
Cowbell?
Drums for dancing, drums for war, drums.
That Rosa Joshi with Upstart Crow Collective did a Henry VI compilation. It was Henry VI parts 1 through 3 in 2 plays that they just called Part 1 and 2, and the production overall was called Bring Down the House. And it was an all women and non-binary production. She did it in Seattle, and then she opened it down at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. But of course, it got closed down because this whole season was canceled. And they had giant like Tico drums on either side of the stage that were used for all kinds of stuff. And the ensemble of actors would bang them and play them in lots of different ways for battles versus scene changes versus time lapse versus, you know, like those drums basically created the soundscape of the world. It was super cool.
I love drums.
Drums are great. We can agree on that.
So we're driving the 5 among us crazy because
Sorry,
we're not
Kelly.
on script.
Look. There's no script. I've got my script. I have my books to keep me safe. I'm totally fine.
Okay, so tomorrow is 6.
So tomorrow's 6, which is what, Kelly?
The Loyalist.
Loyalist.
And I'm interested to hear about this because I understand 6s are entirely driven by anxiety, and I have a feeling that I'm going to learn something. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah.
Also, I think we're more likely to have like recognizable characters tomorrow. I think there are more like big wig loyalists in Shakespeare than there are big wig observers.
I for sure agree 100%.
I wonder if part of that is just because of the nature of theater, right? Like I wonder if it's just less narratively useful to have a character who is about learning and getting information, because that's kind of what the audience does. We are
exciting.
We're kind of the 5 in a play, right?
Mm.
And so you don't need a lot of characters that are doing that work or that are motivated by that. That's our job.
Yeah.
Like
I can't imagine
yeah.
there are a ton of 5s too, as far as people and actors that go into the theater as a profession, unless they're behind the scenes. Like we're not spotlight people.
There's a lot of dramaturgs.
Yeah. I was thinking dramaturgs, but like in order for a play to work, a play works almost entirely because there's a lack of information.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's where the mystery comes from. That's where the question comes from. All of that. So
we would just be like, wait, time out. What's wrong with you people?
Yeah.
Like if there was a 5 in a bigger role than Lodovico in Othello, the play Othello wouldn't happen. The reason why Othello happens, that play, is because there are no 5s on Cyprus.
They're a bunch of dopes not putting it together.
No, but like I do wonder if there's an argument to be made that like meta theatrically, like 5 is the least useful Enneagram type to put into a play, because that's what they're doing would be the audience's job, and if they were in the story, they would bring the story to a halt. I wonder if that's something that is like a trend in theater.
I suspect it might be. I also am thinking right now about the difference between types of actors. Yeah. And like we talked about 3s and 4s being like having, you know, like actors being of those types being drawn to acting because they're in those types. But I also think there's a kind of actor that's a 5 that's super analytical, probably technical, outside in kind of type, as opposed to the other 2, which might be inside out. Do you know what I mean?
It's the 4 wing.
And like I could see dancers, for instance, being highly 5-ish, but still sort of in that group of like, these are the
That's a tough one,
people who
just
are
because of
drawn.
the body repression. Like that would be really impressive. I would want to know that 5, because that's.
I'm thinking of the like the biomechanical type as opposed to the lyrical type. Maybe that's what's in my head, you know?
Maybe. Yeah. No, that's a tough one. But I'm curious too, and we haven't talked about this yet, and I would love to, maybe on episode 9, I need to know what you guys think Shakespeare was.
Yeah, that's a good.
I'll let you think about it.
That's
You just froze the conversation because now my.
That's a good last episode question.
Another fun fact about 5s is that our processing speed is really low. So I don't know if you guys have noticed this with me, but I have to formulate my answers. So off the cuff questions, they're not hard. I've gotten much better, but Jeremy, you do this a lot. You sit and think and we're like, okay, is he frozen? Is he coming back? So that's something that you have to forgive, especially in team environments. If you know that there's a 5 on your team, I've had people say, hey, I'm going to email you something. Can you get back to me when you're ready? Like, instead of just like hitting me up on a meeting with a question that I need to sit with and process, not anything even that important, just anything I need to process it. And it'll take me a second to think through my answer, and you'll get a full-fledged response, but it's going to take me a minute while I sit with it.
Every surprise feels like an attack.
Ooh, God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be that the coffee cup is out of place. You know what I mean?
That's a lot. But no. And that's why we withdraw, because it's a surprising world out there, right? Like you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're encountering. Social interaction that's not planned out is awkward often. I'm outgoing. I'm extroverted. I'm friendly. Like I'm fun, but if you catch me on an off moment where I haven't like prepped for it, I could say like the dumbest stuff and just be like, oh my God. Like it's just awkward because I'm not present in it. I'm off thinking about something else while there's a human standing in front of me talking. I have to be like, okay, person, talk to them. So anyway,
okay.
Forgive me for all my
6
pauses.
tomorrow. I'm
6
excited.
tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, friends.
Anyway, toodles. Ta-ta for now.
Bye, friends.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Our podcast was produced by Claire Martin and Jeremy Feebig. Ashanti Bennett is our general manager. Our theme song was written by Owen Eddy. This podcast was made possible by our friends at the Arts Council of Fayetteville and Cumberland County and our fabulous monthly sustainers at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. You can join us there for an exclusive weekly podcast and loads of other fun perks. If you've enjoyed your time with us today, subscribe to this podcast or leave us a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts from. If you want to hang out with us in a future episode, drop us a line at hours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS@sweetteashakespeare.com. Thanks again for listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Until next time, you that way, we this way.